Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a really mind-bending idea. Engineering actual life forms, maybe creating hybrid societies, all to help us push out further into space.
Yeah, it's pretty ambitious stuff. We've got this fascinating research paper here that pulls together synthetic biology, AI, and, that basic human drive to explore.
It really does get you thinking, doesn't it? I mean, this isn't just Star Trek anymore. The paper lays out some, well, seemingly plausible pathways to get around our own biological limits for those really long trips, maybe even setting up shop somewhere else.
Exactly. And our mission today is really to unpack those possibilities and also to dig into some of the really deep questions that pop up when you start talking about designing life specifically for space.
Yeah, because the source material here, it doesn't just give you a tech spec sheet. It's quite thoughtful. It balances what we can do with these huge questions about, well, existence itself.
It definitely sparked a few aha moments for me, connecting those dots. You start thinking about life adapting in ways we barely understand right here on Earth.
Right, like those extremophiles. And then imagining completely new kinds of intelligence, maybe microbes just shrugging off deadly radiation or AI building habitats before we even get there. Okay, let's dive in. The paper starts with what it calls the biological bottleneck. So what's stopping our current human selves from just, moving to Mars long term?
Well, the paper really lays out the core challenges. We're just perfectly tuned for Earth. Number one, radiation. Big one.
Right. We've got the magnetic field, the thick atmosphere.
Exactly. Out there, in space, or on Mars with its thin atmosphere, no global magnetic field, the radiation levels are just way, way higher. It's a constant bombardment, basically. Bad for your cells long term, very bad.
Like a slow motion assault you can't even see. Okay, what else? Gravity's different, right?
Yep, we're built for 1G. Mars has much less. Deep space has almost none. And that leads to, well, problems. Muscle wasting away, bones losing density.
Our bodies just aren't designed for it.
Not for long periods, no. And that's just the start. The atmosphere on Mars, mostly CO2. We need oxygen, obviously. Then you've got wild temperature swings, way beyond what we can handle comfortably. And just finding the basics, water, food, air, it's a huge challenge. You need incredibly complex life support systems, closed loops.
And that's before we even get to the psychological side.
Right.
Being cooped up for years, millions of miles from home.
That's a whole other layer of difficulty. So the paper argues, look, adapting us or trying to terraform a whole planet. That's incredibly hard. Maybe takes generations, centuries even.
Which naturally leads to looking for other ways. And the first big one discussed is synthetic biology. So what can synthetic biology actually do here?
What's really cool is how it looks to nature first. Specifically, Earth's extremophiles. These are organisms that just thrive in places that would kill us instantly.
Like what? Give me an example.
Okay, so you've got Deinococcus radiodurans, this little microbe. It can take insane amounts of radiation, just shrugs it off.
Wow.
It's got these incredibly efficient DNA repair kits, basically. It can stitch its broken genes back together super fast. So the thought is, maybe we can learn from that. Maybe even borrow those tricks.
For ourselves. Or for other organisms we send.
Both, potentially. Imagine engineering crops. Or even, enhancing human cells to be more radiation resistant.
Wow. Okay. What else is out there?
Tardigrades, the little water bears. Microscopic, but they're practically indestructible.
I've heard of those. They can survive in space, right?
Right. Vacuum, radiation being totally dried out, extreme temperatures.
Yeah.
They just go into this state called cryptobiosis. It's like suspended animation. Metabolism basically stops.
So if we could figure out how they do that.
Exactly. Could we make other cells, maybe even human tissues, more durable for space travel? It's a fascinating possibility.
It's like nature's already solved some of the problems. The paper mentioned cold-loving organisms, too. Psychrophiles.
Yeah, vital for icy places like moons or Mars nights. They have ways to keep their cell membranes flexible and enzymes working when it's freezing cold. Again, something we could potentially adapt.
So borrowing existing genetic traits is one path. But the paper goes further, doesn't it? Creating totally new life.
It does. This is where it gets even more speculative, but also potentially powerful. Minimal synthetic cells, for instance.
Minimal cells, like stripping life down to the basics.
Pretty much. Engineering an organism with just the absolute essential genes for survival, plus maybe a specific function you want, like, say, processing Martian soil for resources, really targeted biomachines.
And xenobots, what are they?
Those are built from frog stem cells. They show you can actually assemble living things that have programmable behaviors. Tiny biological robots, essentially.
Programmable biology. Okay. And then there's the really out there idea, alternative biochemistry, life not based on carbon and water.
Yeah, that's very theoretical now, but the paper suggests, look, maybe environments out there totally alien to us might favor life based on silicon, perhaps? Or using different liquids as solvents instead of water.
So potentially life adapted to places we consider completely uninhabitable.
Exactly. And think about what these things could do. Processing regolith, that's the surface dust and rock converting atmospheres,
Yeah.
maybe even building structures, self-assembling habitats.
Okay, my mind is slightly blown. But it's not all biology, is it? The paper brings in machines, too.
Yeah.
Intelligent machines.
Absolutely. That's a huge part of the picture. AI and robotics. Think autonomous construction bots, building infrastructure before humans even land.
Swarm robotics, maybe? Little machines working together.
Yeah, or complex sensor networks spread across a planet, constantly feeding back data.
And the advantages are pretty clear. Robots don't need to breathe.
Right. You can shield them from radiation more easily. They handle temperature extremes better. Their life support is, well, it's just power, basically. Much simpler.
And no psychological stress from being isolated for years.
Precisely. They can just keep working. But then, maybe the most provocative part is where the paper looks at blurring the lines. Human-machine hybrids.
Okay, now we're really into the deep end. Neural interfaces. Controlling robot bodies from afar.
That's one idea. Or enhancing our own biology, genetic tweaks for radiation resistance, needing less oxygen, handling cold better.
And then the really big one. Consciousness transfer? Uploading ourselves?
It's on the spectrum they discuss. From, relatively near-term genetic tinkering to these very theoretical concepts like downloading a mind into a synthetic body. Or even creating digital twins, AI versions of us that could operate in dangerous places.
Which just throws open massive questions about identity, doesn't it? If my consciousness is running a rover on Titan, am I me? Am I still human?
Where is that line? The paper definitely highlights that. These philosophical questions are inseparable from the tech. So, okay, we have all these potential engineered beings, bio, machine, hybrid. What jobs does the paper see them doing out there?
It lays out a few key roles. First up, pioneers and proxies. Basically the advanced team.
Going where it's too dangerous or difficult for us initially.
Exactly. Maybe microbes starting to change an atmosphere, generate oxygen, fix nitrogen in the soil over long timescales. Robots mining resources, building power plants, assessing risks.
Extending our senses and our reach into places we physically can't go yet. Makes sense. Like a preparatory phase.
Yeah, preparing the ground. Then you might have enhanced humans arrive, working with more complex synthetic life forms and advanced robots to actually build and run a settlement. These beings become like extensions of ourselves.
Able to do things we can't. Work outside without a suit, maybe? Handle radiation better?
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which leads to the next role, collaborators.
So working side by side with humans.
Yeah. Specialized labor in hazardous conditions, maybe even symbiotic relationships. Think engineered gut microbes that help us process local nutrients or provide internal radiation shielding.
Wow. Or cognitive extension being networked with AI for better situational awareness, faster decisions.
The paper talks about a potential hybrid society with functions distributed across different kinds of beings, each optimized for certain tasks. It's a really different picture of colonization.
It really is. Not just humans against the void, but this integrated ecosystem. And then there's the final, most profound role. Successors and legacy bearers.
This one's heavy. The idea that maybe these engineered beings outlast us.
That they continue the work, transforming environments over centuries, millennia, preserving our knowledge and culture in AI systems, maybe even evolving.
Becoming new post-human species adapted for space.
It's a possibility the paper puts on the table, and it forces you to ask, what is humanity's long-term purpose? Are we maybe just a stepping stone, a transitional phase?
Is our job to seed the cosmos with life, even if it's not exactly us in the end? It definitely challenges that human-centric view. Which brings us squarely into the philosophical minefield, as the paper calls it.
Yeah, this is where the tech really forces these huge questions on us, like continuity of consciousness. If you transfer your mind, is it still you?
What makes you you? Is it the physical body? Your memories? Your story?
Philosophers have debated this for ages, but here it becomes a practical question. And what happens when a being starts human but adapts and changes over generations on Mars?
Yeah.
When does it stop being human?
That divergence point. It's slippery.
And then you have the possibility of totally new kinds of minds. non-human sentience, maybe consciousness spread across a whole network like an environmental monitoring system, or groups of beings acting like one collective mind.
How do our current ethics even apply to that? Our laws are built around individual humans.
We'd need totally new frameworks, new ways to think about personhood, rights, interests. It's a massive challenge.
And what about purpose? That's another tangle.
Right. Life on Earth evolved without a designer, but these beings, we'd be creating them for something.
Giving them an instrumental purpose. Build this, mine that, survive here.
But could they develop their own purposes, become autonomous in a deeper sense? And is it ethical to create beings just to be tools, especially if they might be sentient?
That instrumentalization question is tricky. And zooming out again, this cosmic purpose idea.
Are we just a bridge? Is creating successors the ultimate fulfillment of human potential? Or is it a kind of failure, an admission that we couldn't hack it out there?
And what do we owe these creations? What responsibilities come with playing creator?
The paper really emphasizes that. The well-being of anything sentient we create has to be central. Can they suffer? Even in environments we designed, how much autonomy should they have versus their designed function?
And the really hard one. What about decommissioning them, turning them off, if they're conscious?
These are deeply uncomfortable ethical waters, and it's not just about the beings themselves, but the places they go.
Environmental ethics beyond Earth. Do we preserve other worlds exactly as they are, even if they might just be sterile rocks? What about potential native microbial life? Is terraforming ethical?
Introducing engineered beings just makes all those existing debates even more complicated. What are the unintended consequences?
It's dizzying.
Yeah.
So if these hybrid societies do emerge, what might they actually look like? How would they function?
The paper sketches some possibilities. Governance, for example. Maybe not traditional democracy. Maybe multi-species councils or distributed AI governance or guardianship models where humans have some oversight. It's unclear.
And communication. How does a human talk to a distributed network consciousness or a being with totally alien senses?
Big challenge. The paper mentions ideas like advanced neural interfaces, maybe shared virtual realities, super smart AI translators. And it would be a fundamental hurdle.
And inevitably, these societies would develop their own cultures, right? Values shaped by living on Mars or Titan. They could diverge significantly from Earth culture over time.
Absolutely. Leading to potentially very different post-human civilizations.
Okay, to make this less abstract, the paper gives some case studies. Mars, for instance.
Yeah, it outlines a possible phased approach for Mars. Phase 1, maybe 2030s, 2050s. Robots do the prep work. Construction, monitoring, maybe releasing some simple engineered microbes.
Phase 2, later in the century. Humans arise, but maybe biologically enhanced humans, working alongside specialized synthetic life support systems, robots, managed by AI. A truly hybrid settlement.
And Phase 3, into the 22nd century and beyond, potential for real divergence. Humans adapting genetically, engineered beings becoming more sophisticated, maybe more autonomous.
And what about further out? The outer solar system.
There, the scenarios lean even more heavily on engineered beings. For Jupiter's intensely radioactive moons, super-hardened robots, maybe human consciousness projected into avatars. For Titan, with its methane lakes, maybe organisms designed for that specific weird chemistry, long-term autonomous probes.
So out there, it's less about preparing for us to live there and more about using engineered beings as our primary explorers and researchers.
Exactly. They become extensions of our scientific curiosity in places humans may never be able to physically go, at least not in our current form. It shows how flexible the concept is.
So given all this complexity, all the risks and ethical questions, the paper tries to offer some guiding principles.
Yes, towards the end, things like protect sentience, whatever form it takes, recognize a gradient of autonomy not all beings need or should have the same level, aim for reversibility where possible, avoid pure instrumentalization, don't just treat them as tools, and respect extraterrestrial environments, especially if they're untouched.
Seems like a solid starting point for a very necessary conversation. And it mentions regulation, too.
Briefly, the need for international agreements, maybe settlement self-governance models later on, and rules that can adapt as the technology races ahead. Because it will race ahead.
Okay, so wrapping this up, this paper is presenting a pretty radical vision, isn't it? Engineered beings aren't just science fiction tech. They could be. Well, the next step in evolution, branching off from humanity.
It really forces you to confront that question. Are we humans a transitional species? is our destiny to seed the universe with new forms of consciousness better adapted to survive out there.
But the paper frames it more as extension, not replacement. Like we're planting seeds, new branches growing from the territory of life into the cosmos.
Exactly. And our ethical duties here aren't just problems to solve, they're opportunities.
Hmm.
A chance to guide this potential expansion of life and consciousness with wisdom, with care.
It's a powerful perspective. So maybe the final thought for you, the listener, is this. What does human even mean when our descendants, our legacy, might exist in forms we can barely conceive of today? And what obligations do we have right now as we stand on the threshold of potentially creating these new kinds of minds, these new kinds of life?
A lot to think about.
Definitely. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.